normalize the fact that mental health is not, it needs to be just a normal priority, just as you would if you had like a physical illness.
Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to welcome you to the second episode of the Wind Down. In this episode I have some very special guests, your favorite twins, Mary and Martha. Say what's good, ladies.
What's good, everybody?
I invited the girls to come on and talk to us about a very important topic that I wanted to kind of dissect in this episode, and that is Millennials versus Gen Z, mental health, as well as we're also going to touch on a little bit of what's going on with Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, and of course the prime time age of social media and how we're living in it.
Let's get into
All right.
Yes.
The first thing I kind of want to start us off with is a statement that I heard. Millennials are idealistic, meaning they always aim for perfection, and Gen Z are pragmatic, which means they're more realistic or practical. Agree or disagree? For the most part, me speaking from the millennial side, I think that we're definitely more about aiming for perfection because we never had the freedom or the kind of leeway to think about options. We just were taught you have to study, work hard, get a family, like success. You will reach success in this pattern, you know? Then we never talk about potential to fail. We're given this kind of blueprint of here's how life is supposed to be and this is how a perfect life is supposed to be. And we're not allowed to deviate away from it. If we do deviate from it, then it's just like chaos because we don't really know how to deal with it sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I think that whole perfectionism is definitely like a millennials thing as well. I agree. I see that a lot. I feel like it's a mix of both, yeah, for Gen Z. There's still that in the background and there's still that as like the foundation of all your choices because that's the kind of generation that raised you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
The difference is not saying Gen Z don't strive for perfection, but it's just that Gen Z have more of a choice.
Fair.
To not be perfect.
I think I would argue though as well that Gen Z also is in some way, probably not to the same extent as millennials, but more like reaching for perfection, especially because like with technology advancing and things, there's this assumption that everything is like would be 10 times easier for Gen Z, which of course it is in a lot of aspects.
Also it isn't, yeah.
But it also isn't, yeah. So I feel we're kind of forced to strive for that perfection in that aspect as well because we have it supposedly easier.
Yeah, that's a good segue into technology and social media actually. So it's great that you brought that up because we're living in now the biggest social media age, and it's such a big influence in everyday life. And I feel like that impacts as well the way we exist in this world at the moment, more so for you all than us. But millennials are kind of stuck in the middle between like the baby boomers, which are our parents, and Gen Z. We're trying to somewhat fit in the middle of both. How do you both think that it affects you on a day-to-day basis? How do you feel like it impacts you? Do you feel like it impacts you?
I definitely think it's impacted me because I feel like there's like this unspoken aesthetic or standard that's like on social media right now that everyone's trying to achieve, and it's like if you're not reaching that, you won't get the same hype or you won't get the same support as someone else would. Yeah, it's caused a lot of problems in terms of like body image issues and how you see yourself, always having to present yourself in a certain way so that you always look your best. I feel like the fact that we don't always look like that and how we look on social media is like it's very hard to normalize that now. Like we're trying to, but I feel like maybe nowadays it's getting better, but I feel like at the start of this boom, like it was really hard because like everyone was just trying to keep up with the hype and keep up with the trends. And it's like if we didn't match, people would definitely say something about it.
But also on the flip side of that, I have a lot more people advocating for being different.
Yeah.
Even black women wearing their natural hair and things like that.
The only thing is now I think it's getting to a point from what I've noticed where being different now is also being an aesthetic in itself.
Yeah.
And that's where the lines are blurred. First of all, it's mentally exhausting, draining to always try to keep up with something. Social media is this invisible thing, you know, and yet it impacts us so much. And I do think that it plays a huge part into mental health issues these days.
Another note on social media, there's often this misconception that it's a waste of time. We always joke about it, like calling me out, oh, you spend all day in TikTok kind of thing.
Yeah, true.
And
True.
not just from you.
I do that.
Yeah. But I feel like it's kind of our source of information. It's our way of learning. I'm more of like a practical visual learner, and I don't know if that's like same for you or if it's same for Gen Z in general, but I feel like there are a lot more practical learners in our generation. So things like Instagram and TikTok, they are our sources of information for us. They're how we get news.
Yeah, the only thing with that obviously is because social media is, there's no filtering. There is potential for, you know, false news, fake news to be moved around, and a lot of the time it is like almost as much as real news, there's fake news going around. Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka. Now, fun fact, they were actually both born on the same year in 97, which is a little cute fact that I learned today. Let's talk about what's happening with them. They're a prime example of Gen Z, social media, mental health, the trifecta that we're just talking about right now.
So if you don't know what we're talking about, by the way, Naomi Osaka and Simone Biles both decided to take a break, mental health break from all the pressures of, you know, their sports.
Can we just talk about how powerful that is at this time for young Black athletes, female athletes, to be able to kind of put pause button on this so-called glory and all this pressure that they've been having built up on them? First of all, seeing them as young women in these high positions, how does it make y'all feel?
It's encouraging. I mean, they're role models for the rest of us who are going through something, but they can't express that because there is so much pressure to get through, you know, whatever it is, whether it's going to uni, going through work, things like that.
I agree. Yeah, definitely. They're prime examples of just the pressure put on young, specifically Black women. And I spoke about this a little bit in my first episode. If y'all haven't watched that, peek it now. I was talking about how the trope of the strong Black woman needs to end, because it never allows us to actually just talk about important things like mental health openly, be vulnerable, or we're not given as much support as our counterparts. So now, them standing up for themselves, and this article that I read, I'm going to link it in the description, it talks about how for the first time in history we're seeing Black women take rest that they deserve. Just back from our ancestors, we've always kind of had to struggle in a way, and I think that's put a lot of weight on our shoulders.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a huge step, because I think like not only does it take courage to be able to do that when you've reached that kind of status, because they've all said the pressure of the world on their shoulders. So there's not only that, there's also I don't know, for Simone, for example, like her being in a team, you know, she had to also not only think about herself. I'm sure she went through the process of like, oh, what about my team? Her being the greatest of all time. Yeah. That whole pressure and that whole title. So like, it takes courage to be able to take that step for yourself. Yeah. But yeah, put a pause to the glory, I guess.
It's brave. What they both did was brave. The expectations that they have from their family, from their friends, or from all these young women around the world. It's not easy to take a step like that and kind of show them that, hey, me doing this doesn't make me any less brave, but it actually makes me more brave.
That's what the article was trying to highlight, was that it shouldn't be seen as a weakness to what they did. It should be more like a strength, if anything. I think that's why they've become such big role models now for a lot of people, a lot of Black women that look up to them.
That's true. There was another thing in the article. Here she even said, for Black women, rest is revolutionary. Us even saying, hey, we demand our rest, that is a revolution in itself. I mean, we may not necessarily be sitting down in an all-white bus like Rosa Parks or, you know, marching like Martin Luther King, but we are definitely revolutionizing in our own way. And I think that's the thing about Gen Z that I've noticed the most and I can appreciate, is that y'all are starting to revolutionize the world in your own way, and you're taking power, you're taking ownership of that. And that's something that I always envy, is that you'll have the capacity to do that. And this I think ties in again with the whole fact that you are allowed the freedom a little bit, you know. And for us, it's almost like we're too far gone, kind of almost not necessarily too late, but sometimes I feel like
You've adapted.
We've adapted, or we've been conditioned for so long. It's so hard to unlearn certain behaviors. And also, if we were to do something like that, we would have a bit more, I think, eyes on us, or a bit more judgment.
And may I add, like, I feel like also you guys are probably one of the first-hand generations to experience, like, probably a lot of generational trauma as well. There's still a lot of healing to be done for you guys so that you can take those steps and be okay with that, if that makes sense. Because I feel like there's been a lot of stuff that's been passed on to you guys, maybe intentionally or unintentionally. Yeah, forced you guys kind of to adapt to that kind of mentality sometimes.
I completely get what you're saying, because I used to say that we were very much the trial and error generation. A lot of things have been trialed on us, or we've been the guinea pigs for a lot of things. And I feel like this is one of them, like the generational trauma. I really do think we're harboring a lot of that, and there's things that we're fighting to work through. Again, we don't have the capacity to be able to do that because we feel like we have certain responsibilities for perfection and things like that. Ties into that whole thing about being idealistic and stuff. And I feel like when I'm walking through the world today, my main things on my mind are responsibility that I have for my family and for myself. I can never really truly be myself. That is always something at the back of my mind.
I agree. I definitely see that. But also in saying that, still in this generation, I mean, I don't know, it depends, I guess, what kind of family or background or something you're raised in. But I still feel like if your choice is out of the traditional, I think that's when the whole perfectionist mentality comes in, at least for me. Because not only do I have to step up so that I can prove that, like, it's something that I can do, but then if we're tying it back to the whole pressure of being, like, trying to be successful black women in like a competitive industry, there's that too, because you're constantly stepping into white spaces and trying to just improve, but at the same time, like, you know, you have to work probably 10 times harder so that you're not, because you're already different from them, so then you just have to like step up even more. All that pressure kind of forces you to feel like you have to be on it all the time. Gen Z is one of the luckiest generations because we do have access to a lot of support. Social media now as well is being used for like a big activism and educational forum where people can actually talk about topics that maybe millennials didn't get the chance to talk about, because in terms of mental health, that's something I'm very passionate about and it's very close to my heart. We all need to work together to normalize the fact mental health needs to be just a normal priority, just as you would if you had like a physical illness.
That's what I'm saying.
You know what I mean? Like if you were sick or you were injured, you wouldn't push yourself because you physically can't. And it's like, why do we have to like keep sacrificing that for our mental health? Because it's seemed less. I don't know. I don't understand it. But yeah,
especially in a time when mental health is one of the biggest problems facing youth today, and with the addition of the virus, the lockdown, and all that.
Yeah, how that impacted people. Yeah.
So I feel like, do you feel like with your friends, can you openly talk about these things, or do you talk about these things?
I think we're lucky we have each other to talk to, and we tell each other everything. So I think about that kind of stuff is never a problem between each other. But even with friends, voice in the back of your head kind of saying, oh, do they even care? Are they gonna listen to me, kind of thing. But I would argue that we do feel more comfortable talking to friends with that. I think it's more normalized, especially like, as I said, because it is a much more bigger problem nowadays. So I think,
or much more openly talked about problem.
Oh yeah.
Because I feel like it was always there, and even our parents are carrying it. Do you feel like you have to always put this front? I feel like millennials, they do, because that whole idealistic thing again. Even if they don't mean to, we're not as open. Like the other day, I remember having a conversation with a group of friends about, hey, you know what, I'm considering starting therapy because I feel like there's a lot of things I need to work through. I remember the unintentionally even the mood kind of changed, not in like a judgmental way or anything, but it was more just, okay, you're talking about that, cool, that kind of thing. I felt it even though no one said anything.
This is my experience, just my whole experience with mental health and how like it's shifted throughout the years. Part of working on my mental health is also learning how to like destroy that front as well, because I feel like that front for me has always been there, regardless of friends or family. Just the type of person that I've kind of like been, and also the type of industry that I've like chosen to kind of put my eyes towards. I feel like there's a pressure of you always have to present yourself well because you don't know who's watching. So I always felt like I had to present myself in a certain way, and I think that kind of played into like how I talked about my mental health as well. It's something I'm definitely still working on, but in saying that, I do feel like if I was to bring it up, it wouldn't be a problematic situation. We could have a decent conversation about it. In saying that though, there are some people that still kind of don't know how to talk about it and not really sure how to like support you in a sense. So it might just be a thing about having an open conversation. And some people might just need to like do some more research or some more education. If you are going through stuff, it's also not simple to still have that conversation. I feel like regardless of the generation, and that's where we have the similarities. We've come a long way, but we're still coming out of that stigma. The fact that it's even a big deal that iconic people like Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka made that decision, eventually we want to get to a point where it shouldn't even be made a big deal because it's normal.
Yeah. And hopefully they don't receive as much backlash, because there was a lot of backlash and people coming at them for not being grateful, for knowing that they're in such a high prestige place, and it's like,
how dare
what
you?
are you trying to what are you trying to kind of insinuate? What's your takeaway from this?
I guess from this conversation, my biggest takeaway would be that Gen Z and millennials do have a lot of similarities between us that we can, you know, share with each other, and we have a lot to learn from each other as well.
Yeah, and we can use that to draw on and bridge the gap between generations, and use that to move towards like a positive, progressive way, because as much as we don't realize, we are living in the same lifetime. We are going through life together. We can just learn a lot from each other, actually.
And how we can like just prevent further things from happening, like further negative experiences from happening for the next generation. You know, we'll be building a better generation from there on.
Exactly.
Just like share our experiences and just like talk openly about, hey, like, you know, I actually think of this, and then, hey, I think about this, and then kind of bring that together and just be like, cool, what can we do about it?
In terms of like Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka, I think, Martha, I want to draw back to what you were saying about how hopefully we can get to a point where we can normalize mental health and taking care of yourself mentally. When I talk about getting like a wellness check, even now, I always say like I want to just make sure everything's good physically, mentally, emotionally. Like what you said, I hope we can get to a point that we can normalize it.
That's also in part the government's and like funding towards mental health, improved mental health,
providing more like
resources.
Resources. Yeah. To finish that off, I honestly think if we're on the topic of like therapy, it takes a while, but I 100% believe in it now, because I think you just have to think of it as like a self-investment. That's why I think like everyone should go to therapy. You don't have to be going through some really difficult times. Even if you're chill, it's just good to like go into a room, check. It's nice to have someone to listen without judgment, and I think it's also nice that they kind of don't know you on like a personal level. They can give you their like objective perspective.
It's their job, and you're paying hella money for it. They'd be out here actually providing you with the tools to get better.
Yeah.
So yeah. Alright, well, I guess that's it for today, ladies. Thank you so much for coming on again. Great to have a chat and share your insights in the Gen Z era. And hope y'all enjoyed the second episode of the Wine Den. I am Milena B, sending you love and light. Until my next video, we out!